I wanted to do B-roll of Burning Cage, which is a video game that I had sitting in my Steam library for a while. Finally decided to play it because for obvious reasons I've been on a metal kick lately. But then I sat down to play it, and the controls were so janky I gave up after a half hour. So that's not happening. This is another content warnings, all of them book. This one gets pretty intense. It's absolutely horror. There's gore, there's bugs, there's claustrophobia, there's a surprisingly large amount of medical trauma, including being forced to take drugs and being strapped down to a medical table, and hate it. Don't hate the book, but hate that my particular phobia was in that book. Oh, and of course there's plenty of gore. Funny story about that, one scene was described so grotesquely that, and it's a major spoiler scene, I'm not going to say what it is, but you will probably know it if you've read the book. But I was listening to it at work, and I kind of pulled a face because I thought I was alone. And then I saw somebody staring at me through the shelves. And I kind of dramatically took my earbud out and glared at it so that she would know that my face was not directed at her. Not my best moment. Metal may never die, but in this book, a lot of metalheads sure do. We Sold Our Souls is a horror novel about a heavy metal band whose lead singer sells the souls of himself and his bandmates in order to buy his own fame and literally sell out in the worst way possible. And this takes place about 20 years or so after the fallout of that. All the band members have more or less fallen on hard times and are living unassuming, bland, miserable adult life. And that's where the story picks up. So, Chris, the guitarist, and one of the, pretty much she and Terry, the lead singer, were the ones who first came up with the idea for a band and brought the whole group together. And Chris is the lyrical genius, so she's kind of the heart of the band. And she's also the main POV character. And occasionally we also get Melanie's POV. Melanie is a fan of Coffin, which is Terry's new band after he leaves his previous band Dirtwork. And none of these words are spelled the way you think they'd be spelled. I can't quite remember how they're spelled because audiobook, but they're spelled funny because it makes it cooler, I guess. They started their band in high school, so that tracks. Reminds me of Loaded Diaper, Greg Heffley's brother's band from Diary of a Wimpy Kid. Chris is pretty much beaten down by the world. We get a really great intro that starts off with her being a young girl who picks up a guitar for the first time and learns to play it, and starts off really bad and clumsy at first, but then slowly gets the hang of it and learns about how empowering music can be. And we know she goes on to start a band, but then it cuts to her middle-aged working at a hotel with a naked hotel guests pissing on her. So that's quite the whiplash there, and that caught my attention. That kept me listening. She's kind of surrounded by assholes, and nobody really takes her seriously. Nobody pays her any respect, and she's kind of been living in a haze for the past 20 years. She had a hole in her memory from what she calls contract night, which is when Terry supposedly tried to sell out the band and failed, and the band broke up, but he actually did succeed in selling out the band, just in a very different way. And then we cut to Melanie, who is similarly beaten down by life. Melanie is a young adult, late 20s. She's a waitress saving up her money to go to a Coffin concert. And her douchebag boyfriend is making things really hard for her. But she's kind of like in a shitty situation, but trying to escape and determined to do her best to get out of there, which I appreciate and I relate to on a spiritual level. And the fact that Coffin's music has helped her through that hard time. Like, yeah, music is probably, it's one of the reasons why I'm still alive today. Music gave me language for how I was feeling during a very chaotic and horrible time in my life. Like, about 10 or so years ago, I got hit with a double whammy of my parents divorcing and me finally being able to process the trauma of the child abuse I endured, and my grandfather dying, who was like my biggest father figure. So I listened to a lot of emo shit, but that emo shit saved my life. And I know people think I have a horrible taste in music, but what can I say? Those bands were there for me when other people were not. And Melanie feels the same way about Coffin, and I totally get that, even knowing how evil Terry is as a person. I mean, hey, I'm big into the band Disturbed, and while I don't think anybody in the band is as evil as Terry, the lead singer has become a bit of a douchebag over the years, but sucks because a lot of their songs, especially 10,000 Fists and Reason to Fight, have really helped me process shit. It's hard to separate the art from the artist in something like that. And Melanie goes through a kind of fallen pedestal arc when it comes to that, which was kind of interesting to read because I had gone through a similar arc myself. So, Chris kind of goes on a journey of finding out what happened on contract night and putting a stop to Terry's evil, because she sees that he's doing a kind of farewell concert for his retirement, and she feels like something's up because she knows him and she knows he's an evil douchebag. So she starts looking into it, and she calls up her old band members because she still kept in touch with them despite them kind of, like, most of them not really liking her after what happened during concert night, because most of their memories are gone, but they do remember that she kind of, like, interrupted things somehow and started a fight and drove drunk and got them in a horrific car crash. So they're all mad at her for that, which, fair, I guess. Really sucks when you're trying to uncover a Lovecraftian horror plot, though. So Chris does manage to get in contact with Scotty, one of her closest friends from the band, and quickly learns that she's in way over her head. But there's one thing about Chris, is she is extremely determined. Like, she locks on to her goals like a pit bull and does not leave. She does not give up. So, despite all the shit that's thrown at her throughout the book, she keeps going and keeps, like, going after Terry to try to stop his plans, especially as she learns more about what those plans are. Melanie becomes important later on, but I don't want to spoil things because I think if you like metal, you should read this book or listen to the audiobook. The narrator is great. Like, she has the kind of voice that you would expect a former metal band member to have. So yeah, I really admire Chris's tenacity and determination and fighting spirit, and I think it really, and how she's strengthened by music, both her own and others, throughout the story, and like how much power music gives her. Like, it's really great. And I absolutely love that it takes place in, well, actually the book takes place all over the country because it's a cross-country road trip story. Which I kind of wish they'd lean more into the road trip part, but I can understand. They're on a time crunch. They are being watched. Stuff happens. But it is definitely a journey plot, and I find that really interesting. I like seeing characters get put into completely new situations, completely new places, and having to adapt to that. So anyway, the band is actually formed in the Allentown, Lehigh Valley area, which happens to be where I grew up. And since I don't live there anymore because I moved out, I can say that because I'm not giving away my address because I don't live there anymore. But yeah, that whole area, that whole eastern PA kind of Appalachian area is very economically depressed. Used to be a big coal area, would ship coal nationwide and throughout the world, and there used to be a lot of industry around there, but it all kind of dried up, and now it's just really sad, and a lot of buildings and main street storefronts and stuff are abandoned. Like, you can tell it used to be a nice place, but now everybody's just kind of living in the past or living for the present and not really caring a whole lot about the future or about, like, people don't have a whole lot of passion for life there. It's depressing as fuck growing up there. It's tough growing up in a place where people have no ambition, especially if you yourself have ambition. So it's pretty clear to see why a metal band would grow up from that area. And in fact, that area does have a small but very enthusiastic metal fandom community thingy. I've never gotten much into the scene myself, but I've started listening to 97.9X and stuff like that, and I still occasionally tune into 97.9X. They have a locals only hour in their schedule every week where they showcase local bands. And I found some pretty neat bands that way. Like, I like Crooked Ways. Crooked Ways is one that I can point to off the top of my head. So yeah, Allentown, Lehigh Valley area, great place for a metal band to come out of because that place is dark and depressing and definitely fodder for inspiration for that type of music. There are two main villains in this book, and I want to talk about Terry first. So Terry kind of represents, to me at least, just how toxic metal can get. Like, part of the reason it took me so long to get into metal was because the fandom around it and the cult of personality around a lot of these just bad dudes who are leading the band was not something that was very inviting to me. Like, People like Machine Gun Kelly, who allegedly has done inappropriate things to children. Disturbed, who the lead singer seems to have taken the red pill. And straight up neo-Nazis, like straight up white power and neo-Nazi bands. Like, metal's a very iffy genre to get into. There's a lot of great stuff in there, a lot of very progressive stuff, and like a lot of bands that just sing about things that have a lot of meaning and just things that are really cool and epic without having all the toxic messages. But there's also a lot of people who use metal as an outlet for really bad things, and that's a problem because metal is all about catharsis. It's all about laying loose and like unleashing your dark side, kind of, which if you're getting a large group of people into a crowd and doing a live show of that gets dangerous real quick if the people who are like running the show don't understand the kind of power that they hold. Like, obviously there's a lot of property damage going on, things being set on fire and looted and stuff, but there's also instances of stampedes and crowds crushing each other and rampant sexual assault. Just like every bad thing that can happen in a crowd. That's part of the reason why I've been avoiding seeing live music, is because I know how mindless crowds can get and how easily they can get out of control. Even if you're not seeing a live show, music is something you gotta be kind of careful with what you're listening to, especially with metal. Not because metal's evil, but because metal is cathartic. Because it can kind of lead you to internalize some really bad, really toxic, like really hateful messages if you're not careful of who you're listening to and what messages they're sending. Again, I'm not saying metal's satanic. I'm not saying metal is worse than other genres. I think I could say the same thing about rap and about rock and punk. I could even say about country for a different reason. Country is a very like comforting genre to a lot of people. So they'll hear somebody twanging a guitar and singing in a southern accent and just nod along with what they're singing, even if they're singing something extremely sexist or racist. I grew up listening to country music, so I've seen that happen. That's why I now have an anything but country policy. But that's just my personal bias, and I know that there's a lot of country out there that is good and is not inherently like bigoted or bad or harmful. It's just due to my personal baggage, that's the genre that I choose to avoid. Except for Dolly Parton. Dolly Parton is always a win. And I love that in this book, Dolly Parton is included, and like even this hardcore metalhead main character listens to and adores Dolly Parton. So yeah, music in general is very powerful, and if you're not careful, or if somebody is outright malicious, they can use it to very, very bad ends, which does happen in this book. But it can also be a very strong, very powerful force for good, which is exemplified in the character of Chris, and also Melanie, because Melanie may not be a musician, but she is a fan, and like the positive impact that music has left on her, even if it's from somebody like Terry, does have a positive impact on her life. In maybe a little bit of a roundabout way, but like it does encourage her to actually do something with her life. I mean, who could have seen the consequences of her doing something with her life? That's a whole other thing. You know, just move across the country to turn over a new leaf and end up being sucked into a Lovecraftian blood sacrifice. You know, the usual quarter life crisis. But the real big bad, and this is kind of revealed early on, but it can also be considered a bit of a spoiler. So I'm going to set the goalpost here that from now on I'm going to be talking about major plot spoilers. So if you haven't read the book, again, do so. So, final warning. Okay. Everybody who doesn't want spoilers is gone? Alright, so the real big bad is Black Iron Mountain. It is the place of evil / like actual entity of evil that is the kind of the subject like / villain of Dirtwork's final album, Troglodyte. Today I learned what troglodyte means. Apparently it means cave dweller. I don't know how I didn't know that before. I thought it just meant like gremlin or something, but it actually means cave dweller. Which brings to mind the parable of the cave. So that's a real neat parallel thing. I think it fits with the story. So was it black iron or black steel? I think it's black iron. The mountain. So there's the mountain, which is kind of powered by a wheel where slaves are chained to the wheel and they are constantly turning it. They can't do anything else. You just keep grinding away at that wheel. I wonder what that's a metaphor for. So yeah, the mountain is greed, capitalism, one of those, both of those. They're the same thing anyway, so. And Terry is in service to this mountain, and the mountain keeps demanding more and more and more from him and from the world. And it's kind of like a black hole just swallowing everything, consuming everything. So I guess the mountain could also be a symbol for consumerism. It kind of shows the danger of selling out in the music world because it allows corporations and entities to taint your message and to like turn music into a shallow plastic version of itself that takes away meaning rather than adds it. And when art becomes super corporatized like that, it really does feel like it's stealing your soul. I mean, I've experienced a little bit of that when I tried to get into writing for other people, and that's why I don't want to be a writer as a job anymore. I still think it's an important part of my identity, but I don't want to be paid to write because that comes at a cost, and it's a cost I'm not willing to pay. Is when art is in service to a corporation, then it's not your own. You are creating something, putting it out into the world, and then it's being twisted, and it still has a strong influence on people because it still is technically art, but the actual meaning of it is stripped out. The soul of it is stripped out, which can have a negative effect on society as a whole. I feel like I'm going off the rails with this, so I'm going to end it here. Speaking of going off the rails, there's also quite a bit of conspiracy theory stuff going on here. Kind of a what if the conspiracies are real type thing, which I have mixed feelings about, because, I mean, conspiracy theories interest me, some of them at least. Some of them are obviously, like, recycled bigotry, but some do have a kernel of truth, and some actually are true. Like, declassified documents show that the government was experimenting on its own citizens at some point in the past, and might still be. I mean, that, like, we don't know for sure that they stopped, but that's just alleged. That's just me spitballing ideas and just pulling stuff out of thin air. I don't actually believe that. FBI, you can stop watching me now. So, yeah, on one hand, some conspiracies have a kernel of truth, some actually are true, but a lot of them are just plain misinformation, bigotry, selfishness, and just not great things to be circulating around for impressionable people to find. So I was a little bit uncomfortable with some of the characters who are conspiracy theorists and some of the little blurbs that are at the beginning of each chapter. But it does kind of tie in, because a lot of the conspiracies that I mentioned do kind of have a kernel of truth. Some are obviously way out there, but it's true that there is something dark that is controlling society subconsciously, sort of, or behind the scenes, below the surface, something that we are not aware of. It's just the nature of the thing is different than what people are saying. Like, it's not the deep state, it's not the lizard people. It's this, like, eldritch horror. So, that was pretty neat. Kind of reminds me of my view of religion, that I believe that a lot of religions do have a kernel of truth to them, that they all have some part of the truth, but the real truth is too massive for us to comprehend. So that might sound really bleak, but the ending of this book is actually pretty hopeful, and I'm glad for that. I like happy endings, sue me. So even though Terry told Chris that souls cannot be reclaimed because they have been consumed, they are gone, they are eaten and shat out or whatever, somehow she still goes on to continue to play music, and, like, allegedly the book tries to make it ambiguous, but considering her bandmate recognized the musical style in some of her allegedly new songs, like, he's like, "Ah, yeah, that's my girl." So that sounds like she was able to write again despite losing her soul, which makes me wonder if through music, souls, or art or something, souls can start to regrow, like, that they can't be killed completely. It makes me wonder. Again, the book kind of leaves it open-ended, but open-ended is better than a closed case, completely impossible. And it also ends with the idea that the Mao might not be able to be defeated now, but over time more and more people can chip away at it through passion and perseverance, like Chris did. And I think that's a really nice message to end things on, because I think that's how systemic change happens, one pebble at a time, as the book says. So, elephant in the room. Stranger Things spoilers, by the way, if you haven't seen the latest episodes of Stranger Things as of the recording of this, go watch them. So this really reminded me of Eddie, and that got me thinking about how he was done so dirty in Stranger Things. Like, his badass metal concert thing was just a distraction, and he ended up dying in the stupidest way possible. Like, I guess they were trying to do a whole, like, going from coward to hero arc, but the arc should have culminated with that concert, and then that concert should have done Vecna real harm in a way, or like given a boost to the characters in a way beyond just distracting the Demobats. Like, that's just such a lame way for him to die. Like, okay, he could have gotten swarmed by the Demobats during that, like, concert. That would have made more sense. That would have been more climactic, dramatic, heroic death, rather than him just running into a crowd of them, killing himself off for no reason. The ending they went with just makes him look like an idiot. And that's super frustrating, and I needed to get that out. However, I will say that I do really appreciate Stranger Things Season 4's focus on music as power, even though I wish they could have done a little more variety than just running up that hill. But I know it's hard to get copyrights for songs, so whatever. But again, that really rings true for me, because music is pretty much a lifesaver for me. It has such a powerful impact on people. That just really fascinates me, and it's part of the reason why I edit AMVs. I haven't done that in a while either. I should go back to that. It's hard to put my love for music into words. Just, music is so fucking awesome, guys. Like, it is so powerful. I really think that it is real magic. I'm not exaggerating. I think music is how humans create magic. Art in general, but music is the most tangible way to see that. So yeah, if you liked this video, please leave a like. If you have anything to say, please leave a comment. I love talking about nerdy things with people. Plus it boosts channel engagement. And if you want to hear more book talks, then please hit the subscribe button. And by the way, I did notice and keep forgetting to mention it, but thank you to the one person who has subscribed to me so far. I'm pretty sure it's either mom or one of my friends, but regardless, I do really appreciate that, and I hope you, whoever you are enjoying this channel.